third point of departure between the two is that in a biblical view of the world, Paul builds this argument in Romans 1 where he says, you got Jews and Gentiles, and they're kind of in this ethnic strife where the Jews feel like they've got God's law, so they have a leg up on the non-Jew. And the Gentiles are thinking like, well, we don't buy into all these wacky fairy tales, we're superior. And so Paul, in the first 3 chapters of Romans, he says, hey, Jews, you have the law and you break it. You need grace. Hey, Gentiles, you have the law that God wrote in your heart and you break it. You need grace. And so all this crescendos in Romans 3 with that famous statement that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All. In other words, the Jews and Gentiles couldn't play these games of like, well, we're oppressed and you're the oppressors, therefore we're good and you're bad. Paul wouldn't have any of that because he knew if he played those games, he would effectively be planting C4 at the foundations of the church. It would blast Christian unity to bits. And so you could picture, for a first century Jew saying, well, I'm at the Lord's table. There's Rufus the Roman over there. I don't see my brother in Christ. I see Rufus the Roman. The Romans are our oppressors. And so, I'm not going to break bread with him. Or you could go to the other side of the table to Rufus the Roman, and he could say, well, that's not my brother in Christ over there. That's Judah the Jew. His ancestors fought the Maccabean revolt where I lost my grandpa. And so now I'm going to blame him. I'm going to treat him as an exemplar of his people group. And now you would just have a never-ending game of grievances versus real church unity. So this is why Paul argues that, look, all have sinned, so everybody get off your high horse. But now there's this new identity in Christ. And he says, in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Gentile. In Christ, there's neither male nor female. In Christ, there's neither slave nor free. You are all one in Christ. And so that's where a biblical approach to justice is going to start. This other kind of justice goes the exact opposite direction. It would say, let's treat every individual who comes across your path over the course of your day, and don't see the individual image bearer of God before you. See a cipher or an exemplar or a proxy for their entire group. So I meet a black person, I meet a white person, I meet an Asian person, I meet a Hispanic person. And instead of like seeing that unique image bearer, it's automatically, well, okay, you're oppressed, you're the oppressor. And that's just, I've seen it play out in the last few years in the church, and that is not a recipe for church unity. And that's why, again, Paul would have none of that in the first century as he's seeking to bring all these diverse tribes together. But again, social justice B, as I call it in the book, or this other version, this counterfeit version of justice, plays these kind of tribal warfare games that are not helpful if we want to pursue real justice. So there you have three differences. If we're easily offended, if we're bearing the fruit of resentment and assuming the worst of others and self-righteousness, and if we're grouping people into identity groups rather than the biblical identity groups, we're all fallen in Adam, but we can be brought together as family in Christ. If we're missing that, then we're missing biblical justice.